Hello, good morning. Today is April 20th, or 420, if you're one of the weed smokers out there. Personally, I've been taking a detox recently, and I will probably continue to detox today. We also had the solar eclipse yesterday, and if you may have noticed, I have kind of slowed down in the videos that I've been recording. I haven't been recording as many videos, and if there was a time when I would stop or go back to smoking weed in the midst of detoxing, I probably wouldn't do it right on the heels of a solar eclipse. I might get into some of this later, though. Maybe I'll talk a bit. My topic for today's video is going to be the lunar eclipse in Scorpio, which is going to be the last eclipse in Scorpio for a while, and now we're going to be having eclipses in Aries and Libra. And I've got some stuff to say, although before just jumping right into that, I'm going to read a Bible passage. I want to preface this in that I'm not reading. For me, my spirituality. Some people don't even like the word spirituality. Some people don't like to talk about religion. Some people don't like to use the word spirituality, and they prefer to talk about religion. I was raised a Unitarian. My parents were Unitarians, and they took me to a Unitarian church, and that to this day informs my perspective in that I can see things to appreciate and that ring true in all these different traditions, and I'm really open to all of it, right? And so I'm not. I just want to say that I'm not. I think there's a lot of value in the teachings of Jesus Christ, but I'm not doing this because I'm like a born again Christian and putting that one denomination above everything else. I'm still essentially a Unitarian as I was raised, right? So in this spirit, anyways, there's a reminder. Anyways, I've been going through some stuff, and I was reminded that the most important thing is really kindness, right? Or you could use different words. You could also say love, to do everything in the spirit and love. And in that sense, I would just, as a reminder, to read this is Corinthians 13. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long, and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror, darkly. But then, face to face, now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. I have to admit, it did say dimly, and I changed it to darkly because it's that's where a scanner darkly comes from Philip K. Dick. And I also have to admit that something recently, it came to mind anyways, I have a moderator position on this Facebook group, Shades of Awakening, and somebody made a post talking about what your what things were influential on you as a child or whatever, or what kind of childhood things had a kind of a truth in it that resonated with you and all these kind. But what's funny is that when I was a little kid, something happened where I was like 6 years old in grade 1, and my teacher was really disturbed because the drawing that I did was the Terminator, the Terminator skeleton with the glowing red eyes, and it seemed all evil and demonic. And I think my teacher, well, it wasn't a Christian school. I think my teacher was Christian and was kind of disturbed by the kind of artwork I made as a young child. And my family let me watch things like the Terminator movies, and I was always into really dark stuff, right? And maybe that's I see a lot of stuff going on these days with conversations about AI and fear about AI and technology and stuff like this. And there's also what I was thinking about when I'm bringing this up is that when I was a bit older, but still fairly young, when I was maybe like 12 years old, I started getting to anime movies, and there's this movie that had a really big impact on me was Ghost in the Shell. And that line from Corinthians is that when I was a child, I saw as a child, and I did as a child, and I put away childish things. That was in Ghost in the Shell when I was 12 years old. And it was like, the thing, there's a song by a band called Of Montreal called I Was Never Young. And in some way, that's what I relate to. And I don't mean I was never young and like I had a hard life growing up, like I wasn't allowed to be a child. It was when I was a child and I went to the library in elementary school, I couldn't find books that I wanted to read because it all seemed too childlike to me. And actually, one of the first books that I found when I was a young child that got me into reading was a Terry Pratchett book of the Discworld series called Interesting Times, which was about a wizard and a barbarian, right? And that was just like, it hit the spot. Like, oh my god, this is exactly what I'm looking for, right? And I read so many of these Discworld novels. And I had a huge collection at one point in time, but I decided to give them away because like they took up a lot of space, and I figured like if I ever wanted to read this stuff, I could always get it again, or I could so I donated my Discworld novels to the world to circulate or whatever. But Terry Pratchett has always been a big influence on me. These are just kind of like, I don't know, some anecdotes anyways, right? But where was I going with this? The darkness, right? Is that I'm doing a video right now about the lunar eclipse in Scorpio. And Scorpio is known for being dark, for being kind of secretive, kind of like hidden. And there's certain things like last night I watched The Wizard of Oz. And I think The Wizard of Oz might be more of an example of like what people usually think about like childhood movies that are influential. I watched Wizard of Oz when I was a little kid, but the only thing I can remember of an impact from that movie was the flying monkeys. And that the flying monkeys I thought were kind of disturbing, but I don't know how much it really seeped in when I was young, right? But now now I can watch Wizard of Oz and I can see things in it that I wouldn't have been able to see before. And before Dorothy gets picked up by the tornado and leaves Kansas, there's this whole interaction with the little dog Toto and the neighbor who is upset at the dog, who's trying to take the dog away. And then one of her family's members says, like, I had to have some things that I would say to this person, but because I'm a good Christian, I can't say them, right? And I think that kind of goes a little bit with this Corinthians thing, is that there's this kind of thing that we have to do everything with love, and we have to do everything with kindness and all this kind of stuff. But one of the things I also found recently was I been going back to the Wu-Tang Clan, right? And that because the Wu-Tang Clan have always been kind of interesting to me because the RZA and the GZA were guys who advocated things like you know, if you watch the movie Coffee and Cigarettes, there's this great scene where they're hanging out with Bill Murray and they're telling him to lay off the coffee. Do too much coffee causes serious delirium, right? And to lay off the cigarettes, to drink some herbal tea, you know, this kind of, and there's something about if you kind of listen to these guys, you can kind of tell they're onto something, right? And these guys are, but they're also living in a certain situation. If you're the kind of point is that, you know, I have to say, I'm just a white guy. I didn't grow up like in the ghetto, right? But I did, you know, I have had traumatic things in my life, including when I was 17, I got mugged. I suffered from multiple stab wounds, right? I got hospitalized. I nearly died, right? And in my life, more recently, I was hospitalized for autoimmune problems, right? And I nearly died. And there's all these things that I went through where I was brought to the brink of death, and you know, really saw the limit of where the thread of life hangs, but came back from that. And there's something about where people talk about spirituality that often that opens up from near-death experiences, and often that opens up from repeated near-death experiences. There's a show on Netflix called The OA, and this is a theme in The OA, but it's kind of done in the sick way, where there's a scientist who's intentionally putting people through these near-death experiences to study the spirituality behind it. Like even saying that, though, is a kind of a spoiler. So, maybe, spoiler alert if you haven't seen The OA. Maybe I should put that in there in the beginning. I'm just kind of riffing right now, right? But the whole, okay, Scorpio, it does go with the Scorpio archetype, though, because Scorpio has to do with things like death, you know, it has to do with the darkness, it has to do with Halloween, right? Because one of the things I also have to say is that when I made my last video, there was a video I made that I took down, and maybe I'll talk about that later, but the last video that I've left up, I had some comment, you know, there are people who will attack you for using tropical astrology rather than sidereal astrology, right? And one of the reasons why I still use tropical astrology rather than sidereal is because seasonally, Scorpio season is Halloween, right? And there is, regardless of what is going on with the little lights and stars in the sky, there's a seasonal cycle that is natural, and that even if you don't pay attention to astrology, you can often pick up the moods, the sort of underlying natural thing going on in the seasons, right? And so the astrology that I do is more, I would say, in tune with these natural cycles of, but the thing is, honestly, there are problems because I don't know how that, I have friends that live in Australia, and in Australia, it's like opposite, you know, that when we have summer here, it's winter over there. Or if you live by the equator, you have a totally different seasonal system. And, you know, the thing is, some people may see that as a bad thing, right? That like, oh, this isn't a complete absolute truth that I'm giving you, right? That where I live, you know, Scorpio season is Halloween, and that, you know, in India, they might not even celebrate Halloween. You know what I mean? Like, in other countries, they may not even have the same holidays. They may not even have the same cut. But what I'm saying is, I live here, and this is, you know, if you live somewhere else, if you want to do things a different way, go ahead, you know. I'm speaking from the position of where I live, what is around me, what my life is like, what makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense for me to pretend I'm living in India. It doesn't make sense for me to pretend I'm living in, you know, on the South Pole. You know, it's like this is kind of what astrology means to me, right? And but anyways, going with all this, right? I've been going through a certain process in making these videos, right? And if I want to talk about the eclipse in Scorpio and what that means to me, like, I have to admit that I took a long break from making astrology videos. Well, not really that. I mean, if you go through my videos, you will see that there is a gap, and that I went back to watch some of my videos, and it's like, Yeah, I could kind of see that I was kind of in rough shape. I was recovering from my health problems. I was recovering from that hospitalization, right? And that in the process of recovering, what I realize is that it's not just healing the body, it's healing the soul, it's healing the mind, it's healing the spirit, and that I have to admit from this point, from this perspective, that up until this point, all these videos that I was making on my astrology channel and the other, I have another channel where, if I just want to talk about things that aren't astrology and I want to make a video, I've got another channel. I'm making all these videos from a place of partial awareness, right? But the thing is, it's not real. There's no blame for that, and what I have to accept is that, I'm making content to deliver to YouTube for public consumption, and there may be all sorts of people watching this from their own position in life, from their own place that they live, from their own belief system, from their own degree of conscious integration, all this kind of stuff, right? And I don't really have control over who watches my videos or what they make of my videos or what kind of effect my videos has. All I can do is try my best to be in the spirit of love and kindness when I do these things, and not hatred and anger and resentment and right. But there's kind of an issue with all this, in that if there is this energy. Oh, here's my dog. June, want to come on my lap? If there is, here we can have June in the frame. If there is a spirit, if these emotions are present in one way or another, that I don't know how to just make them go away. Just because, or I can do my best not to entertain them, right? I can do my best to, you choose which wolf you feed, right? Not to feed the wolf of fear and anger and resentment. But the thing is, even with all these efforts not to express something, there's some energy that has no place to go, and it's with this sort of thing with Lunar, Eclipse, and Scorpio, it's that whole thing about the good Christian woman who's I have some things that I would like to say, but because I'm a good Christian, I'm not going to say them because I'm kind, right? And there's a song by RZA Bobby Digital called The Unspoken Word, which maybe I'll link in the description. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, really, right? But it's kind of there's this kind of thing where, if you think that by not expressing all this stuff, or by trying your best to just repress, it's basically what Freud and Jung were talking about the id and the shadow, right? And that the Scorpio is all about the shadows, right? It's all about these dark places that either you have to be private about, or you have to keep hidden, or you have to repress, and all this kind of stuff. And I think that I'm just saying that if I'm going to make this video, at least all I can say is that I have had an experience recently with all the stuff that I've been doing has kind of come together to wake me up a little bit. And it's no secret, I have made it no secret that I have been going through a process that me and my friends relate to as spiritual emergence, right? And that I am on a community, I'm in part of communities that deal with this kind of stuff, and it's kind of this issue that everybody's just doing the best that they can, and that for me it's been a long-term process. I didn't just get to this place where I am overnight. I had my initial I had a psychotic break, if that's what you want to call it, in 2011, right? And so it's been, what is it? So 12 years now? It's a long time, right? And it's not something, and it's been something that I couldn't just do all in one go. And that I couldn't, there was unconscious shadow forces that I was not able to face them. And that the good news anyways is that, everybody is allowed to go at their own pace, and there's no pressure you know, there's this idea that I saw an old friend of mine who helped me out when I was going through hard times. He posted a meme that seemed resonant. That was like, if an egg breaks from the inside, and that's like life breaking open, right? But if the same egg is broken from the outside, then that is death, right? Or it's traumatic, right? And so we have to respect that if people are going through this kind of process, that you have to, it helps to have the will, the effort to sort of, feed that little thing that's growing inside the egg and encourage it to break free. But if you go around trying to force that on other people, it's traumatic and it's unkind and it's not with a spirit of love, right? But at the same time, life itself does tend to be traumatic, right? Life does tend to have things happen, like I said, like when I was a teenager and I got mugged and I got stabbed, and then that put me in a near-death experience, and that probably opened me up a little bit more to the spiritual, right? And that there's certain things, it could also be like the death of a loved one, right? That people don't, some people may have their spiritual life opened up because, maybe a loved one dies or something like that, and that kind of process of grieving and that process of wondering about what's going on in the afterlife and stuff like that could open it up for people, right? But the thing is, it's like nobody wants their loved ones to die, right? And so it's a trauma, right? So there's and the other thing too is that when the spiritual path, I feel one of the things that I just want to say is that I feel it's disingenuous. There's a big marketplace where people are looking to spirituality, looking for something to provide some kind of comfort. And I watched The Wizard of Oz last night, and the somewhere over the rainbow is kind of like that, where you're kind of dreaming that, like, if I leave where I am, if I leave my home and find this magical, fantastical other place that, like, that's going to be the thing that helps me, and that's going to fix me, and that's going to heal my trauma and solve all my problems and all this kind of stuff. But when Dorothy actually goes on that journey, I mean, there are lots of fantastic, wonderful things that happen in the land of Oz, but there's also the wicked witch of the West, right? That there's and the scary flying monkeys and all this, and that there's both. There's a good side of it and there's a scary side of it, right? And that you're not. The thing is that if you're committed to that path, you accept that both of those things are going to be there, and that you have to have courage and you have to have love and you have to have intelligence to be able to go through all this stuff, right? And the thing is, if that's and I think that was one of the things that I was mentioning in my last video, is that if you only want to be comfortable, then you might as well, just drink beer and eat comfort food and, be a consumer, or like, and the thing is, I have to say that it's always been a frustration of mine that this kind of culture, right? And I think I don't want to make it personal. Like, the problem about my own things that I'm working on is that I'm not perfect with this. I still have frustration, I still have anger, I still have resentment, I'm not perfect, right? I'm not perfect, I'm a human being, and I haven't found the solution of how to just make my frustration, my anger, and my resentment just go away. And I've had the process open up, which is like, I've been at least able to see some of the things I was unconscious about, and that I made a video about the aspect between Venus square Saturn that's been happening. And, this is the thing. My little dog here, she's a great helper. And one of the things that I noticed was that when I was making this video about Venus square Saturn, June here was getting nervous, and June was scratching at the floor and all this, and she was like trying to warn me that I wasn't putting the right kind of energy in my video, right? And so and then after, I don't want to say some of the things that, whatever. it might not just be me. The thing I also have to say is that over the last 6 weeks, I was taking a course on Shakespeare's Macbeth, right? Hosted by J.F. Martell of Weird Studies, and I didn't really talk about that in my videos because I didn't think it was really relevant. But there's a line in Macbeth where he says that, my mind is full of scorpions, right? And that I am a guy who has some Scorpio placements, and I'm a guy who has some Sagittarius placements. So even if you go sidereal, I'm even more of a Scorpio than I am in tropical, right? But there's something about like the lunar eclipse in Scorpio and the mind that's full of scorpions. And the whole thing is that I don't want to be like a so what's a Scorpio like? Scorpio has a reputation for wanting like revenge or something like that. I don't want to be a bitter guy looking for revenge, or it's a lame game to play, right? But that's what if you read ancient astrology, the Scorpio just sound like the worst bastards of the bunch. They're just like, but there's something about Scorpio that's like taking this Macbeth course. There were certain parts of this Macbeth when it's just like the pitch blackness of it, which is like, what people would talk about the lure of Satan, the lure of the darkness. But there's some kind of this thing where when you get into this, like, it's like this kind of like luxuriating in this like black velvety, like, or it's like I was always, this is something that always people talk about too, like the way that nature is. That some people might say that nature is either like, they paint this picture of nature that it's just like a comforting place where there's no judgment, that everything's just green and lush and supporting of life. But there's also, there's death in nature, there's predators in nature, there's poison in nature, there's all these things that are dangerous in nature, right? But I've always had this kind of intuition that there's something like am I sick? Am I twisted? Or is there something in that side of nature that I actually kind of like? And I think that when I was living in Vancouver Island, I met a lot of people that were kind of like hippies, I guess, if you want to use. I mean, it's kind of just a label, right? But the kind of people who live on the Gulf Islands are usually the kind of people you'd call hippies. But a lot of these people were a lot more comfortable with that side of things, right? They're much more comfortable with the fact that there's death in nature, that there's fact that there's, there's a kind of a fear or whatever, or, well, I mean, they're more, when you're comfortable with fear, it's not so much of a fear, right? And I'm just saying that all this stuff goes with the archetype of Scorpio, right? But I just, one of the things I wanted to say, like, it's almost half an hour, right? One of the things I wanted to say is that my dog is squirming. I don't know if is it okay, June? God, maybe not okay if she's like that, right? June is like my little barometer. She's like, or do you just want to go for a walk? We'll go for a walk after June. There's certain things that go on. What can I say? I have to admit that be careful with Macbeth because it's a cursed play, and there's certain trouble that was happening over the past weeks. I don't know if it was me and my own anger and resentment and my own stuff like that, or if it was the curse of Macbeth or the curse of Macbeth showing me what I needed to see that I was unconscious of, my own contradictions, right? Because if you go back, one of the things that happened recently, I have an ex-girlfriend who I've kind of just made the decision that I'm not going to go back to that relationship, but I can't seem to get her to leave me alone. But I was considering, the thing is, I'm open. I'm not the kind of guy who has hard rules, like, I'm never gonna hang out with this person, I'm never gonna talk to this person, I never want to see this person again, right? But sometimes, if somebody doesn't give me my own space and someone keeps pestering me, I might have to, I say rude things, I lash out at people because I don't know how to get my point across. I don't know how to say, give me some space, leave me alone, let me be independent, let me do my own thing. Like, I have this need to be my own person, and not to be controlled by other people, not to just have other people's attachments on me, dragging me down and stuff like this. But I don't know how to, if I don't know how to do that kindly, I don't know how to do that kindly. If I knew how to be more kind and loving, I would be. I'm only doing the best that I can, right? And that to be kind and loving doesn't necessarily mean to stay in a toxic relationship for the rest of your life. That's actually could be a lack of love and respect for yourself to keep playing out these toxic patterns, right? But what is it going with this? Like, I can't control who watches these videos, and I can't control what they make of them, but what was I saying? One of the things is this. My ex-girlfriend was saying that she watched some of these videos that I was making about the Deleuze and Guattari's Anti-Oedipus, right? And I rewatched one of those videos, and I was also kind of joking about this stuff about Deleuzian astrology and all these kind of, I was doing all this funny stuff over the last, the stuff that I've been doing has been I took a break from making astrology videos for a while, and then I started again, and I was doing all this funny stuff where I was trying to reconcile my philosophy with my spirituality, with my political views, with all this kind of stuff, and I feel like June is she's blocking my head as in Dan, just shut up and take me for a walk. There's enough of this bullshit. But I just wanted to say that if there may be things that are true from an intellectual point of view, but if you have a spiritual practice, then what happens is that there's also the actual embodied. What can you say when you're grokking it, right? When the understanding really permeates your being, and that if there's something that there's the idea of transformation that's often used with Scorpio, because Scorpio has these different images. There's the scorpion, there's the eagle, there's the phoenix. There's this idea of death as a transformation, the shedding of the old skin, all this kind of stuff. That the transformation kind of happens when you could have all the right ideas, but then you could realize you're unconscious because you're not practicing what you preach, or that you haven't really sat with what you think and really let it sink in, right? And I made a video talking about the Dataism. We don't need any more data. We need to actually just kind of sit with the information that we have and listen to things deeply. And this is what I was saying about June here, is that I took down this video because I was not listening when I was making the video. My little dog was trying to warn me, and I wasn't listening to her, right? And I just kept I have the right idea. I know what it is. I don't need to slow down. I don't need to listen. I just keep doing what I do. And then my little dog is June is. I have to also say something too, is that June is a dog. I didn't go and pick out June. My family was going to do this thing where they were going to do a foster care situation, where they were going to foster care for a dog and then give her away to another family, and that my family took her to go see another family, and it just didn't seem like a good fit. And then June, she just seemed to like our house, so we kept her, or whatever. But there's something, when we got June, I was going through a big spiritual shift, and it was this little dog is like a little helper to me. And what I realized is that she's like, oh, hell yeah, Dan, I am. Yeah, June. That I have to listen to my little dog here. And it's a reminder too, I have to listen to my own body. I have to listen to my own soul. And that I don't even know if when I was making all these videos, it's what the New Age people say, whether you're in alignment or not. I was not in alignment with the truth of my heart. My heart was all out of joint, out of alignment, and that, it's kind of so funny, this MacBeth course, because it's some people may say, why the hell would a bunch of people be like, okay, this is a cursed play, and we're gonna go and spend 6 weeks just investigating the curse of Macbeth. You know, you could say that these people are a bunch of idiots, or you could also say that it takes a great deal of faith to approach this kind of problem. And there's something about, you know, at the same time, I saw that there's some internet friends posted some stuff about, they were taking, like Gabor Mate was doing an online course on healing and becoming whole and stuff like that. And it was funny because it was like, I actually had this thing about like healing and becoming whole and integrating trauma, and I didn't get it from doing a course with Gabor Mate. I did it by taking this course on Macbeth and doing Shakespeare, right? And it was like somehow sitting with Shakespeare for 6 weeks, it was like it showed me my own unconscious, my own contradiction, my own unresolved trauma, my own shadow, right? And like Macbeth says, his mind is full of scorpions, right? And I realized that what am I trying to say with this? You know, we like the Scorpio archetype is a survivor, right? And for the longest time, I identified as being a psych survivor, a survivor of the psychiatric system, right? But at some point in time, there's more to life than just surviving. Sometimes you need to change. Sometimes you need to evolve. Sometimes you need to progress. Sometimes you need to grow up, even, right? So it's like there's something about the scorpion works as a protector. The scorpion, but sometimes, you know, you have to let go of the scorpion, right? There's also certain images that come up, like, that have been resonant for me, is like there's the one of the snake, right? And not to say that there's all these things that, like, animals aren't evil, nature isn't evil, but when I was a little kid, I had a dream where I was like a knight fighting these snake nightmare creatures, right? And it was like the snake often represents the force of desire, right? And, you know, a lot of people might not want to, like, you know, they see desire as a good thing, like a healthy desire to move them forward. But I mean, there's also a desire can just keep you stuck in toxic cycles, toxic dynamics. This sort of like, you want to pull yourself away and free yourself from negativity, from, you know, as David Lynch says in Twin Peaks, you got to dig yourself out of the shit. But when you do that, it's like there's all the snakes of desire, whether it's your desires, whether it's other people's desire, like coming after you. And it's like there's that kind of thing is like, I feel like that's kind of like Scorpio, is that like there's the things that we might have to put on a good face and say, like, present ourselves as kind, loving, truthful, you know, good citizens and stuff like that. But the stuff we don't want to admit is still there, right? The unresolved traumas are still there. The unresolved desires are still there. All the stuff, all the dark, you know, when you pull over the rock and see the worms and the creepy crawly things wiggling around underneath, it's all like, it doesn't go away just because you say, I'm not going to express it, I'm not going to admit that it's there, I'm not going to entertain it. It's going to be a wolf, you know. It's also that thing about feeding the wolves, right? Like, you could look at it as like, I'm going to feed the wolf of love, of kindness, of acceptance, and not feed the wolf of trauma and fear. But it's like, maybe what if that just makes the wolf more hungry? What if that just makes the wolf more thirsty to go and attack? Because what if the wolf is just being neglected so that it becomes that much more scarier because you're not dealing with it, right? And there's something that I got from Buddhism, which was actually like to feed your demons, they say, right? Is that if you have these things, it's like it might actually help to feed them, to give them what they want, and to say, hey, look, you negative entities, you negative things that are clinging on to me. Look, you know, you can have love too. You know, you may not be the angelic beings of light and perfection. You may be the squirmy little snakes and scary things, but you have a place in the universe as well. And that, you know, what it means to be whole, the wholeness, is to see that all these things have their own place in the great ecosystem of the cosmos. That there's nothing, that even the things that we say are evil and dark and bad, those are part of this beautiful dance of life, right? And there's the image of Shiva. What he does is that he has to put his foot on the ego. There's this little kind of dwarf creature that Shiva puts his foot down on. You have to suppress this thing. You have to suppress this thing that's like the desires, the selfish impulse, and all this kind of stuff. And then the dance of life unfolds. That in spite of all the chaos, in spite of all the trauma, in spite of all the bullshit, in spite of all the things you don't like, it's all right. It's all good. It's all perfect. It's all whole. It's all, and the dancing Shiva reminds us of this, and it's beautiful. And you don't have to do anything to make it that way. It already is the case. And the only thing that stops us from seeing that is our own shadow, our own, as I said, as I read from Corinthians, the only way we can't see the great perfection of everything is that we haven't put our foot down on the dwarf, right? Or, like, I don't use the 12-letter alphabet system, but in ancient astrology, the 8th house was associated with Typhon, which was the most terrifying of all the monsters, right? And Typhon was described as being like a Godzilla creature made of snakes, just a big monster of snakes. And what did he do? All the gods fled from this monster and hid in animal form, right? And so, we may have an idea that nature holds some kind of spirituality, but it's like the idea that there's like the gods have to flee and hide. The gods have to take on a disguise because there's a monster there, a monster of attachment, of craving, of addiction, of fear, of control, of panic, all this kind of stuff. The monster of Typhon. And that keeps us in these cycles of addiction, of dependency, and all this, right? And that's why one of the things that I've been going through recently is really having a detox period and trying to get over my addictions and all this kind of stuff. And I don't want to. The thing is, I don't want to be unkind to old friends. I don't want to be unkind to people who haven't if you're at a place where you're still in an addiction. If you're not in a place where you can deal with your trauma, it's okay. There's no pressure to deal. You can deal with everything at the pace that is comfortable for you. However, that doesn't ensure you that life itself doesn't throw difficulties at you. It doesn't ensure you that life isn't going to throw trauma at you. And that all I can do is encourage people that you can make your own efforts to wake yourself up, to deal with your trauma, or you can live unconsciously and have traumatic shit happen in your life that wakes you up whether you want to or not. And it's like, it's less traumatic if you do it yourself, is all I can say, right? And I don't know. Have I said too much? Is this too much of a video to make? I don't know. But at least, whatever. There's something. I feel like there's one other thing I want to say before I end this. Before I move on to the next thing. I don't know. I feel like there's some other idea I wanted to include in this. I can't. My mind. It's just left my mind now. there's this whole thing, like, one of the things about Scorpio is what they're saying in Corinthians about how, to prophesy in part, right? Or to have knowledge, but to speak knowledge in part. And then do you get to the point where you can't speak the knowledge anymore? You can't prophesy anymore. Or you can't say anything anymore, right? And to me, it reminds me of this thing about William Shakespeare and Macbeth, that, life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, right? And I feel like you could interpret this multiple ways, right? That maybe, like, if you have something to say, maybe for somebody like Shakespeare who wanted to communicate something to people, and they couldn't hear what he was trying to say because they were unconscious. They could not see, if you have an unconscious block and somebody's trying to tell you something, it may just sound like a sound and fury, a tale told by an idiot, signifying nothing, right? But, like, sometimes when even if you can't understand it, the world might be trying to tell you something, right? It may just seem like a bunch of noise to you, but the world may really be trying to tell you something, right? And the best we can do is try to listen more deeply, right, to what's going on. And I have to admit, I'm not even very confident, like, based on the way that my past videos were, it's obvious I was in a state of unconscious. I think I even knew, right? At some level, I knew that what was coming out of my mouth was not the most conscious truth, but it was like I was contending with all these unconscious forces, and maybe I still am right now, right? But I'm not, the whole point, though, is that once you become completely conscious, are you even going to be able to say anything at all, right? And this is why my teacher that I work with, she doesn't make YouTube videos. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's also with Plato and Socrates, right? Plato wrote all these books about Socrates, but Socrates was an oral teacher, right? Socrates didn't write books. Socrates just walked around and talked to people. And Plato was the guy who put it on paper, right? But the thing about, if you want to be Socrates, you might end up drinking the hemlock at the end of the day. You know what I mean? That's the problem with being a lover of wisdom, right? Is that it's people will accuse you of corrupting the youth of Athens. But that's, what can I say? This is it's kind of what I like this stuff. I like Socrates. I like Plato. I don't know. My dog's like, okay, Dan, you're done. Let's go. Okay. All right. Hopefully you guys like this one. Hopefully, hopefully, what can I say? My feeling is that I should keep trying to do this astrology stuff. I should still keep making videos, but I had to delete my last video because the process of me integrating, of me dealing with all this shadow stuff coming up is, when I made the last video, it wasn't complete, and, I don't know if it was the curse of Macbeth, or, well, you heard my dog scratching. I shouldn't talk. Okay, whatever. I'm gonna, I don't know what I can say. I'm doing my best. And that's all we can ask from each other, is that we just do the best that we can, and like that Radiohead song, the best you can is good enough, right? Okay.